Hello. You remember in my last video I talked about the fundamental nature of randomness and how order develops from the randomness of things because of gravity and the laws of probability and so on, and that is why the world is not chaotic, although it is built on randomness, but it has order. That means that at the beginning of our observable part of the universe, the Big Bang, it was not possible to predict that the specific objects that exist in the universe today will be there. Nor was it possible to predetermine, to make the fundamental laws, the constants and so on, in such a way that the universe will appear as it is now, and that human beings will appear in this image, which the Christians say is the image of God. That is not possible. But the Christians have one more problem. They would have liked to say that, and they do say it, that the world as it is now was created by God. And because science has proved that the universe has been existing, changing for 13.72 billion years.
So the doctrine of creation again would be the doctrine that God has brought everything other than himself into being without any material cause.
So they say that God has created the fundamental laws and the constants so long time ago with the purpose in mind that people as they are now will appear. But as I mentioned, science disproves that. And also, the Christians have another problem. If the universe was predetermined by God at the beginning to be as it is now, then that means that people do not have free will. And they state that God has created people with free will. How do they get away from this problem? William Lane Craig first states that God created everything outside himself, so God has created the universe and the intelligent beings that are now in the universe. And he says God created people with free will. But then, how did God know all this time ago what people will do if people have free will and do whatever they choose?
God has innately the essential property of knowing only and all true propositions. And so the way he knows the future is not by looking ahead and seeing what's going to happen, it's simply by knowing the truth value of all propositions. He knows which are true and which are false. That includes future tense statements, and so by knowing the truth value of future tense statements, God knows what's going to happen.
Proposition is the new information of anything happening. This information may be the movement of my hand now. This information, so this is a proposition. This proposition is also the information contained in the movement of the tiniest particle in an atom in the star's Centurion, Andromeda galaxy. And so you can imagine all these little movements of all these particles, the particles inside them, the movements or the change in an orbit of an electron, and so on, from this microscopic place to the biggest stars, their orbits or their collisions between comets or other objects in the universe. There are many, many, many things, tiny and big, happening in the universe. All this is information. And about all these things, the tiny millimeter movement or tiny Planck distance movement, this is already information. This can be expressed in a proposition. So God knows all those propositions in the future. How did he know that?
Middle knowledge. And it adds a sort of extra explanatory dimension to the simple foreknowledge view by explaining how God has knowledge of the future with respect to free actions. And what it holds is that prior to God's decision to create the world, God knows how any free creature would freely choose in any circumstances God might place him in. So by choosing to create certain circumstances and put certain creatures in them, God's foreknowledge comes as a result. He knows exactly then how that creature will behave because he knew what that creature would do if he were in those circumstances. So this gives God foreknowledge of the future on the basis of his knowledge of how persons would freely choose in any circumstances they might be placed in.
He has found a solution by taking a word, a noun, making it an entity that exists somewhere, and this noun is an abstraction. This word is an abstraction. It is something that helps us talk and discuss things, and that word is propositions. A proposition. William Lane Craig says that a proposition is just the information contained in a sentence.
Proposition is the information content of a declarative sentence. Take any declarative sentence, it expresses a certain information content. And the idea of omniscience is that there is no fact of the matter, there is no true information that this person does not know, and he believes no false proposition. So he would know only and all facts.
So, the information in this sentence is about physical things happening in the world. And as I told you last time, new things appear, new things happen with completely new properties and characteristics that cannot have been predetermined or made to come out later because of the law of probability and because the randomness is fundamental. So new things appear, novelties, emergencies. So this is the new information created, which cannot be a direct following from things happening previously. It is new. Somebody at the beginning of the universe could not know them, could not know what this something new will appear. Or, as I have said before, he could guess that some objects similar to galaxies, stars, planets will appear, but not the specific stars, planets that you find now in the universe. But this person could not predict, could not know that something completely new, living being, life, will appear. Nor could that person predict how this life will change, what strange, very novel mutations will appear, how the mutations will be expressed in making the new proteins, and how that will be expressed in the organism, and then what the circumstances would be which will favor or not favor this change in the new organism. So that is impossible to know from the beginning what will happen 13 billion years later. But William Lane Craig's God knows the propositions. No, God cannot know the propositions because, as he says, the propositions are the information that is contained in the sentence, no matter in what language. This information is new information. It was created later. That is why God at the beginning could not know that information. So God could not know the propositions. And then Craig has a very twisted theory of how God knew all the propositions of everything that will happen. So something bad happens to somebody, and God knows that. Something bad, this somebody makes a prayer to God, God knows that. And God knows from beforehand what would help this person, what circumstances around him would help this person, and God beforehand, because beforehand he knew the proposition that somebody would get into a bad place, that this somebody would make a prayer, that this somebody, what would save him or what would make him feel better. And at the same time, at the beginning, God made things in such a way that exactly the necessary circumstances will appear that will change the life of this person for the better.
I do think that God can do miracles today in people's lives, but I also think, and this gets back to this area of ordinary providence, that God can be operative in your life and answer your prayers without having to bring about miracles through his ordinary providence. And the key here is to remember that God, as an omniscient being, would know what any free person would freely do in any set of circumstances that he created them in. So that God can arrange for things to happen in the world without having to intervene miraculously or tinker in it, by simply setting up the circumstances and the agents in advance, so that when the time comes, the relevant events will transpire, perhaps in answer to a prayer.
I find these assertions laughable, ridiculous, preposterous. Don't you? Bye.